So I think Fred Upton's got the chairmanship of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and he already pretty much tipped his hand in that Washington Times op-ed where he really laid into EPA authority. So I think he's going to have oversight hearings. He's going to be dragging in Lisa Jackson and her deputies in, and really go after that authority. I don't know that that's going to be able to translate to the Senate or not, and I think Obama is going to try to hold on to what authority
I think Lisa can expect to see a lot of Hill time with her and her staff, and I think she will be called into the Senate as well. I think that fundamentally, even people on the Democratic side that might have supported legislation will be reluctant to abdicate all of this to EPA in any case, that they fundamentally wanted to craft the pathway rather than have it imposed through regulatory paths. So oversight is going to be the word of the day, and the question is, what is the degree of that oversight, and how is it applied, and how does the administration react to it? I don't know if it's Upton or Barton. I know, I think Joe certainly wants it's held as bona fides. He's got the expiration of term rule. People will refer back to the context of the BP thing and all that. But the truth is, he's earned seniority. He's been in that class for a long time, and irrespective of whether he gets chairmanship, he will be very influential ultimately on whatever happens through the committee process. Right. More interesting, I think, is what happens in Senate Energy and in the counting of the Murkowski votes. Right. If Lisa comes back, you will have a serious chance at a bipartisan peace emerging because you've already had that practice ritual going through Senate Energy. And even if she doesn't, you have Burr, who signed on to the electric vehicle bill. You have Lamar Alexander, who's currently supporting the electric vehicle bill. That's a bipartisan bill in play. So there is something to be said about the fact that something can be done. It's just not, the whole enchilada, so to speak, that other people were hoping for.
Yeah, I do think that the big model for whether or not this new bipartisanship experiment can work is going to start with the Senate, and I think Murkowski is going to pull it out. And I think that the Energy and Natural Resources Committee has basically been run as a bipartisan committee.
That's right.
Under Binghamton's leadership. So I think you're going to see opportunities for energy legislation to originate in the Senate, and then we'll see what Boehner and company are able to do with it. I think we're also going to see a push, given the failure of the government and Constellation Energy to come to agreement over loan guarantees for that merchant nuke in Maryland, about whether or not there is going to be support, even with some of these fiscally conservative Republicans, for expanding loan guarantee authority, getting the Department of Energy to drop down that subsidy cost, and maybe even
I think you're right. I mean,
CETA.
So exactly right. I think that that's less a question about the legitimacy of the design of the loan guarantee programs than the implementation of it. And this is something our administration had challenged with. Is something that this administration has been heavily challenged by in terms of their aspirations. But the kind of interest rates and cost of funds that they've wanted to impose on the very industries, whether it's for security or emissions reduction, that they've sought to apply the policy to, has meant that the policy's been useless. Meant that you've spun your wheels, built a bureaucracy, and then you've put out a product that the market can't use. And so that you functionally have got to look back and say, if this is going to be legitimate, if we're going to keep this, what is it we should be doing with these financings? But right now, it's just a question, and it spans both administrations, is its dysfunctional application of the loan guarantee thing. And it's critical because we really risk decades or more of eroding and losing our nuclear industry as a whole. It's atrophied for a very long time, but this was functionally a market signal saying government support for nuclear is no longer adequate or acceptable.
Right. And I think the petroleum sector is breathing a big sigh of relief because, that House oil drilling bill that passed in July, that was pretty tough on the industry. I don't see that moving under a Speaker Boehner or the new composition in the Senate. So I think tough new rules, the significant increase in exposure to liability for offshore drilling. I think those are have a very difficult path forward. So I think the petroleum industry comes out a big winner here as well.
Well, and the truth is that we're going to reopen drilling in the Gulf, and I think you're going to see some oversight and retrospectives on exactly how that was managed in terms of closing it down. Again, I don't think there's any issues, whether it's climate or security or whatever the derivative energy issues are, that aren't going to have a jobs aspect first and foremost. And so what actually happened in the Gulf, whether you were for the moratorium or not for it, as was the case with me, is that you had a massive hemorrhaging in jobs, and so right away they're going to turn the faucet back on jobs or anything that's leading to jobs, and I actually think, based on what I've heard out of the president in the last 2 days, they're likely to be slightly more acquiescent to things that they were formerly resistant to in that respect.
All right, and another big issue is the future regulation of hydraulic fracturing. That's been a huge issue in states. We've got the Pennsylvania governorship going to someone that's more pro-industry on that issue, and this is a big grassroots concern, and the question is whether or not some of those grassroots concerns about damage to water quality and things like that are going to resonate in this new Congress.
Yeah, I think you're going to end up with less of a you are going to have people express an environmental edge to it versus the job piece, but I think the first and foremost you're going to see a state versus federal argument of saying what would be the justification, the purpose for the federal government usurping these state regulatory authorities. And right now, as you indicate, there'll be arguments on both sides, because if you're pro natural gas, you don't like the way that the state is handling this in the state of New York, and if you're anti natural gas, then you don't like the way that Pennsylvania and Texas and some others are doing it. So it's going to be a big issue to be talked about. But
what do you think about prospects of just having federally mandated disclosure of what chemicals are being injected, public disclosure?
Yeah, I think that there will be elements of transparency that are agreeable and can find a pathway for industry consensus. I think that when you start demanding transparency that goes into underlying intellectual property or proprietary formulations as opposed to the contents of materials, then that's really down in the details where things matter. So it's not sort of all black and white. You get 100% transparency and disclosure. You can disclose what are the chemical contents, potential harms, et cetera. But when you get down into formula and things that are considered proprietary by the companies, then I think you start meeting litigation and pushback.
All right.
And so, it'll be, I think the real question, Tyson, is are you going to find people who are able to talk about these issues, engage it, and find some agreement, or are you going to find people who say it's better off with this current formula of this president and his, ideological leanings and this Congress and inside to not talk at all? And what you just had is 2 years of not talking at all. So the question is, what risk do you have when the public, and I would argue it's the bell center of the public, the independents, largely have a throw the bums out mentality no matter who's in office, no matter what party's holding things, because they're not talking, whether that's going to be sufficient pressure to bring people together to say these are the things we got to work on. And but the rubber's going to meet the road, and people who are able to talk without pure absolutes as to whether or not they can actually achieve something.
Right.
So we'll see.
We will.
Yeah. It would be interesting if you and I agree when this is up on the Hill, but we'll it's for another day.
Right.
Anyway, it's good to see you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Take care. See you next time.
You got it.